our old job is still all there. Like what we did before January 20th, we still have to do all that. So this is just an additional exercise. So yeah, it's a fun time.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Hey folks, we're in for a great show today on Simply Trade Podcast, and it is going to be a good discussion. Lalo, I am really excited about today because this is going to be a show that, we talk a lot to our frontline folks, mid-management folks. Occasionally we talk to some executive leaders. Well, this is another one of those executive leaders that we're going to have a good discussion with. But why don't you, I think it's kind of a cool little thing there that you kind of reached out, and it turns out Steve and I had a connection and knew each other. But tell everybody how you got our next guest on the hook here.
Well, it's funny because I hear everybody in the trade community talking about obviously how busy and how things are changing and everything. And of course, everybody is like, just trying to deal with all the turmoil, I guess, or whatever's going on in the in trade right now. And one thing popped into my mind is that how do people deal with it? Well, they need to, if they get headaches, they need to take medicine, and what better medicine than aspirin? And so that, I'm kidding, but anyway, I'm just trying to find a segue here. But actually, our guest is from Bayer, the famous Bayer brand that everybody sees on their in their pharmacies. But so Steve Johnsen has been a connection of mine here for a while, and I thought, we need to try and see if we can get some frontline actual importers here and talking about maybe what exactly is their, not give away any trade secrets or anything, of course, but just how are they dealing with and how are they working through these times where you almost have to be just obviously up your resilience here, just to try to make sure that you are going to comply with any of the changes, and what strategies maybe you may be pulling out of your trade tools, that are available. So I decided, hey, let's see if we can have him on the show. And thank goodness he was available and said yes. He's being very generous with his time here. I know you're a busy guy here, especially these days. But Steve, thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Lalo and Andy, both. I've had a lot of time back and forth with Andy over the years. And thanks for that free advertisement. Aspirin is one of the best products in the world and remains the wonder drug that works wonders. And
still is today.
Yeah, but definitely, captivating time for trade compliance professionals around the world. So it's look forward to this discussion and talking some more with you guys.
Steve, man, it is great to see you again. And it is, I'm looking forward to this discussion because this, you're dealing with both sides of the pond, as we would say, both sides of the ocean here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just teeing that up, that's definitely illustrative of the challenge for trade compliance professional. We don't just have CBP or customs, we got all the alphabet soup there. So our portfolio is full of that stuff, FDA or others, EPA, USDA, that's all hitting us. And yes, Bayer is a multinational company, but we're German headquartered. So we're really keen nowadays on the tariff, let's say threats, hitting EU and threats being targeted at pharmaceuticals in particular. That has us up, has our alerts up. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm sure that you have been getting phone calls from your peers or in the different operating companies, and what's this mean and whatever, and responding to that has got to be unbelievable. And as I've been seeing some of these threats go out there, what I always say that folks have been, and especially at the leadership levels, they've been as jumpy as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. And it's one of those like, what do we do? What do we do? So has that been one of those where you've been getting calls or emails in the middle of the night, like what do we do now?
Multinational companies have all, for a long time, taken trade compliance seriously, but this has really the attention of upper management, in the C-suite and functions like investor relations. I mean, if these things are such a level of materiality that they can really pose financial impacts to companies that have never seen before, if any of these threats were realized. So that, I think, is a part of the value demonstration for the profession, is the ability to communicate, potential impacts. I've shared that in a couple other venues like that. We had over the years a lot of criticism of the ACE system, but the ACE system is proving to be a powerful tool. Not every country has something like ACE, and we can leverage that and almost instantaneously tell you, at least based on historic transactions, what would these tariffs look like, if they were imposed, and what would the impact be. And so, yeah, that is something to quickly be able to tell top management, if this happens, this is what it could mean. Might be the worst case scenario, but you can provide it in, less than 24 hours because of what you have in ACE.
It is almost impossible for one individual to be able to, research and gather the information and be able to respond quickly. So I'm sure you're having to rely on your team in feeding you information. So as they're looking at the potential scenarios, I'm sure there's been a lot of last minute ad hoc meetings and whatnot, but when you send your team out and to research certain things and come back, what's the best way for somebody from the front line or the middle management ranks to be able to communicate up to you? Do you want just a bullet point? You want a verbal? Do you want a presentation? What is it that you would like to see from your team that empowers you to be able to respond to your peers around the world?
I think it is the distillation of all that. You're going to get a sea of data, and how can I take that from my team or whatever and present it into those 3 or 5 bullets that my management can understand. They can give me the C, and I can pretty quickly get to that. But the quicker we can narrow the focus, kind of fishing with a spear and not a casting net. We want to highlight those big sharks, the big fish, not necessarily all the minnows, and allow that to be distraction. So that's really like the distillation of the galaxy down to the point of the sun, and how can we get that big one and show it? This is really what we're talking about. And you're very gracious in your remarks, but that is definitely part of the role I'm playing, and I think trade compliance people are playing, is this voice of calm. It's a different type of presidency with Trump, and he makes a lot of statements that are, get people excited, let's say. And so, to try to keep that steady keel and that voice of calm, there's a lot of little quips that have been said, focusing on, what he actually does versus what he says, taking him seriously, but not necessarily literally. Yes, he loves tariffs, but he loves to make deals. So, kind of putting all those things in context and how you get from your team, all this digital data and analytics, and then putting that with a little color of reality to it, to your upper management, to maintain that calm in the organization, because losing calmness in the organization is not helpful for anybody.
How are you, I guess, leading your team and communicating with them? Are you pulling, regular meetings together, or are you doing it ad hoc?
So I would say my interaction with what I would call my traditional direct report team hasn't changed much. We have a cadence of a regular touch point, and try not to overwhelm our agendas with meeting time because we're constantly doing stuff. And that was the case before any of this happened. I would say where the agenda is getting overwhelmed is the reporting up. And we've created cross-functional, cross-divisional, cross-regional tariff task force to look at all this. And we're a bit of a conglomerate still. We have divisions that do medicine, some do medical devices, some do agriculture. And they have a little bit different supply chains and potential impacts, so that, in certain instances, I'm having to do things 3 times because of the way we're structured as a company. And then because of the materiality of the threats, you have more than ever senior managers in different functions want to have that direct connection, despite best efforts to say, let the experts take care of it. Let's trust that they're doing that. You still have the bits and pieces like, oh, I want to hear this directly from Steve or from the tariff team or whatever you want to call it. So that is stealing calendar space. And so there's a friction there to balance the communication and the awareness with trust and the ability to keep your calendar free enough that you can actually do the work in the meantime. And the one last point is, for all of us, our old job is still all there. Like what we did before January 20th, we still have to do all that. So this is just an additional exercise. So yeah, it's a fun time.
Steve, I guess playing off of that, like you said, your old job is still there. Although some of the tariffs that are coming down right now, for example, a lot of these are not. You cannot like do drawback. You're gonna pay the tariff. You cannot do drawback, even if you're eligible for drawback. That's fine and good. But other stuff that you may have normally not declared drawback for, maybe now you'll do it because that's a little more money that's coming back to you all. Like, how do you do that now? Like, I've heard like other people, for example, that never used to do USMCA because they were duty free anyway. Their products were coming into the United States under 0% duty, so they didn't bother doing USMCA. But now, if your product qualifies for USMCA, you better declare USMCA if it's coming in from Mexico or Canada, because you do get that exemption of that 25% additional tariff. Might as well do that because you are taking advantage of that. And of course, there's also the MPF and going into Mexico, the DTA that you're saving. But again, I don't know how much is that playing into your business, or is it just status quo? I mean, you're still doing it because you did it all along, or I don't know how are any of these playing into your normal process now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, first of all, I feel well positioned. And, Andy alluded to it. Like, I feel I have one of the best teams in the world and one of the best programs in the world. So a lot of those tariff mitigation options we've already been exploring and exploiting. And, I know stories and companies that they have a duty-free product and they're not claiming USMCA because the effort's not worth saving merchandise processing fee. And now they have to figure out how to do it and if to do it. And it takes time to get that built up. And I can say to a large degree, we have that built up. That said, we're also, essentially this is forcing us, I use this term over and over again, it's a no stone unturned approach. So we're looking at every scenario and every option for mitigation, be it a customs preferential program or changes to the supply chain. Any and every option is being considered and put on the table to help the overall situation. That some are showstoppers from the beginning. Some, would require a lot of time and effort and investment. So they're couched that way. Others, we can say, we had this prepped, but not fully turned on. So if this switch gets turned on, we're turning on ours too. And so, yeah, it's just multifaceted, but leaving no stone unturned. So we're ready when it comes.
Out of all of this, what do you think is the general reaction right now in Germany?
I'm not sure. I don't want to pick on my German friends, but I think a lot of countries are a bit shocked by the approach of the administration, the rhetoric that can be pretty abrasive. I mean, you think of some of the things that were thrown out there about Canada. I have a lot of Canadian friends, and they kind of take it personally. I feel like as Americans, we're like, it's Trump. We know what he says and does, and that take it with a grain of salt. But there's people on the other end of those remarks that feels injuring. So there's that, and then there's kind of like the disregard for multilateralism and for kind of not to say rule of law, but like pushing things beyond where they've ever been pushed before, and that it feels very chaotic. Certainly feels chaotic to us in the U.S. So imagine what it feels like in another country. And also from prior administrations, even the first Trump administration wasn't quite like this. This is a different level. But taking Trump aside, all former U.S. administrations for years previously was never this zealous on trade. So it feels new, it feels uncomfortable, it feels chaotic.
I'm hoping that there are not friendships or relationships in businesses, that have been separated and damaged so much because it became a visceral problem. It's like, hey, let's focus on the issue and not from a personal standpoint. Do you see some of that tension that builds up in your organization at times?
Honestly, I think within trade compliance and within these tariff teams, it's probably the opposite. I mean, there's this kind of common goal, and so we're peers, we're friends, we're colleagues, and nobody's saying tariffs are good or bad, or it's a general consensus that they add cost. And us, we're a humanitarian company. The company's vision is health for all, hunger for none, and tariffs on food and medicine are an impediment to that, regardless of how they're structured. So, we're working together to meet our customers' needs. Like, are patients able to get medicine affordably? Are people able to get food that's healthy and affordable? So that's our common goal. Like, we're not fighting about cross-jurisdictional, Trump versus Trudeau. Like, it's about how do we serve our customers.
I think I saw that also. I was at last week at ICPA, and there was many attendees there from Canada, of course, and from other countries. In fact, for some strange reason, this year, I think I engaged with a lot more European attendees than I have in the past at this ICPA conference. And I think you're right, Steve. Everybody there was probably quite a bit more like united as a team, almost like united we stand, divided we fall. It's solidarity. Yeah. A lot of solidarity. There was a lot of that. I think more of what I did see is just like the personal attacks, on like, you're going to be our 51st date, or like things like that. That's what pisses people off, right? And that's. They do put that aside, it's still in the back of their mind, but it's still at the same time the trade community is united in the efforts of getting through all of this, and rightfully so. It makes sense. So,
what has been some things in your younger self in your career that has prepared you for the position you're in? Now, you've been in your role for quite some time, but I'm sure there's some things that maybe it's been some mentorships, maybe it's certain, shall we say, courses or something, or experiences. What is, in looking back there, has prepared you to handle where you're at today? Understanding we're all going to say, well, I could always probably do something better, but you're in the midst of the fire now. Now's not the time to like, well, let me understand and go get a training course. I mean, you need to be prepared, and you're capitalizing off of your arsenal of experiences and proficiencies on things. So what has been, what have you done in the past that has prepared you for today?
I would probably say most of my preparedness wasn't coming from, books or courses. It's been going through fires before, and they were different types of fires and probably not of this magnitude. But that all, kind of has prepared me for this type of situation. Certainly, the evolution of doing this over 25 plus years, you see a lot of things, you experience a lot of things, a lot of change management, a lot of, maybe in the early years selling trade compliance, like this is a real thing. Companies, 30 years ago, that wasn't like it is today. It has a lot more reputation and acknowledgement than it did when I got into this. So that kind of, pushing upward to get the program to where it needs to be has all been there. I do gain a lot from interaction with peers in industry, like my counterpart at other companies, being in industry associations, like you mentioned, ICPA or AAEI, or one I'm in chairing now is called BOCM, Business Alliance for Customs Modernization. I mean, you're talking with big companies, big importers, big exporters, all reputable, all compliant, trying to do the right thing, sharing in the misery, kind of solidarity again. You learn a lot from those people. And that definitely helped a lot too. Probably the thing it's helped me the most is a skill is risk management. And the thing that I'm leveraging now more than I ever did before is data analytics. That having that data of, duty impact, country of origin, HS code, having that, instantaneously or as quickly as possible, that I don't think ever was more important than it is today.
Outstanding. Let's talk just a second here on the risk management side, because a lot of people look at that from it's almost like, well, it's an insurance type thing or whatever. Why don't you elaborate? Because that's not what you're meaning as far as that goes. I would assume it's like, what do you mean by risk management?
So we view our international trade compliance program through the lens of risk management and look at all the potential issues facing the company in import and export activities, let's say, and kind of subjectively map them out in terms of, what is the potential impact if this risk is realized? If Trump puts X tariff on country Y, what does that translate into? What is the likelihood that will occur? Is it, this a bluff, or is this, pretty darn real? And the velocity, like could it happen tomorrow or could it happen in 9 months? And kind of use all that to inform what we do. And so, if you have something that is super impactful, super likely, what can we do to mitigate that and make it less likely and less impactful? What can we already do before that risk becomes realized? And it's just, a philosophical approach to trade compliance.
Well, I appreciate you so much. I would say that as we look at this, if there is something that, as we're looking and going down the road here, you get some other ideas of how people should be looking at and getting involved. You said the trade associations. I would love for you to come back and let's talk through some of this, especially as we get over the hump and say, all right, well, now what's the collateral damage of some of these negotiations? Because there's always going to be, here's one thing, and this is moving so aggressively. Okay, now how do you come back and pull your team back together in some of this or some of the companies and all that? But I'd love to talk to you more on that later. And Lalo and I really do. We talk through some of these things. And when he mentioned about reaching out to you, I was really excited about this. This is great. I mean, Lalo and I tag team on a lot of things here and all that, but you once again have just hit a home run as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I appreciate it. It was a good time. I'd be happy to do it again. It's just fun talking with you guys, and you're way too gracious, Andy, but I appreciate everything you said.
Well, with that, I will say, again, Steve, just thank you for the time. You've been gracious. And folks, we hope that you please look at this, get that nugget of knowledge, that action step you may need to take, but also reach out to those in other countries that you have relationships with. Don't let the saber rattling damage your relationship. Stay together with this and let's figure out a way to work through that. But with that, Lalo, any last words?
Nope, that's it. I mean, thank you all for joining us, and looking forward to our next episode. But thank you all, and have a good day.
Thanks, guys. This was a treat.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, or would like to sponsor Simply Trade, or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.